Welcome, everybody. Happy Tuesday to you. And I am really, really excited to introduce this dynamic, powerful woman who's going to talk to us today. She is a mom, she is a faith warrior, and she's an overcomer. And not only has she been through a tremendous amount, but she has taken her troubles and turned them into a way to bless and help other people. And that is what we are all about here in the SLAE world. So first and foremost, I'm thrilled to introduce you to our very special guest, Ivelisse Page. So welcome, Ivelisse. I'm so glad to have you here.
Thank you for letting me be with you guys today. It's such an honor.
And before we do anything else, tell us a little bit about you. I know you're a mom. Take a minute, brag on your kids. That stuff's all good here.
Yes, I am married to my college sweetheart. It was almost 30 years coming up.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And I have 4 wonderful kids. They range from the ages of 19 all the way up to 27. So, and in my free time, I enjoy being out in nature and reading and spending time with my family and traveling.
I'm surprised with all the things you're doing that you have free time. God bless you for that one.
You have to make it happen.
Yes. So, your journey is amazing. And a lot of the people today don't know about you and what you've been through and what you have done with your experience. And it's just remarkable. So, if you would take a minute and share your journey about, battling with cancer, what you faced, the alternative ways you handled it. And now, before we do anything else, you are cancer-free now since 2008, I think, right?
Yeah. So yes, 13
absolutely.
years now.
Amazing. God bless. Okay. Take it away. Tell us your story, please.
Yeah, well, sure. So I remember hearing those words, that no one wants to hear. You have stage 4 cancer. And I was in the hospital and was a homeschooling mom of 4. I had worked in the evenings. So I just thought that I was burning the candle at both ends. And once the summer hit and my fatigue didn't relent and I had to keep taking 3-hour naps during the day, my husband's like, something is wrong. You need to go in and find out what is happening. And so I did, thinking that I just needed a little more extra vitamin C and iron or whatever it may be to boost my energy level. The blood test indicated that I was severely anemic. And so anemic that he said I had to be rushed to the hospital, that my organs could have failed at any moment. And so that began the investigation as to why I was so anemic. And a colonoscopy to rule out cancer actually discovered the cancer. And I remember sitting on that hospital bed and thinking it was just going to be another clear sign. And the doctor walks in and he says, "I'm sorry, Ivelisse, but we found cancer."
Now, it runs in your family as well, doesn't it?
Yes. And so I had been diligent about following my doctor's recommendations. My father was diagnosed at 37 with the same type of cancer and at the same age, and he died 2 years later. And
I'm so sorry.
Oh, thank you. When I was 13, so at the age of 18, I started having colonoscopies every 5 years and never, not even a hint of cancer. I knew the risks, I knew what to look out for. And the only thing I experienced was extreme fatigue.
Wow.
So, yeah. So, when you hear those words, as many people do today, I just was overwhelmed with emotion of the fear, I believe, is greater many times than the physical side of cancer. And the thought of not seeing my 4 kids grow up and growing old with my husband, it was just a lot to bear. So I had to convince myself at that point that my dad's story was not my story. And that was hard because that's what flashed into my head.
How could it not? Yes.
Yeah. And that my outcome could be different. And I think, the other piece was that my grandmother and half of her siblings also died of colon cancer. So colon cancer decimated my dad's side of the family. And even though I thought my outcome could be different, in my head, I just kept it hearing in my ears, diagnosed at 37, dead at 39. And especially when they told me I had a less than 8% chance of survival.
Less than 8%. So when you looked at that, I know, you were looking at what your options are and anything you could do. Share with us, what your conversation statistics and decisions were around chemotherapy, which is the most common way of treating a cancer like that.
Yes. Well, one of the things that I really encourage patients and those who are on this journey is that everyone is an individual. And just because this is the path that I took does not mean that it's the path everyone has to take, because we're all
Sure.
different. But you need to weigh the risks versus the benefit of every treatment. And when they discovered my chances of survival, they thought I had only stage 3 at beginning. After my colon was resected, I had surgery a week after I found out. I had 1 lymph node out of 28 affected, which means great news. It hasn't spread or metastasized. So I thought I was free and clear. We thought this was the end of the story. We can move on. And whew, we missed, we can move on ahead. And my surgeon said, you really need to do your due diligence and see an oncologist. And so I did. I said, okay, I'll dot the I and cross the T. And
Sure.
I interviewed 3 different oncologists, and they all told me the same thing, that their recommendations was what they call mop-up chemo, which is chemotherapy. And the question that I asked my oncologist at Hopkins, that he was the only one that was able to answer, I asked all of them the same questions. And by the way, if anyone wants those questions, they can download them for free on our website. But I asked him, I said, for my age, for the amount of lymph nodes affected, I'm not a 60 something, extremely out of shape or anything like that. I'm in good health, outside of the cancer.
Yes.
What are my chances of surviving if I did nothing? And he said, your chances of surviving with treatment is 67%. If you did nothing, your chances of surviving are 57%.
Mm.
And that just kind of like, I stood back and I was like, wait, you mean why would I burn down the whole forest for one rotten tree for a 10% benefit? I thought if I did treatment, it's going to give me an 80% chance, it would increase it, big boost. But no, it was a 10% benefit. And then when I had the scan done at Hopkins, then they discovered that it was in my liver. There was 3 lesions. That's when he said, well, we could throw all that out the window. I'm sorry to say that, you have the chances are 8% of the people survive up to 2 years. And that's when Jimmy and I really evaluated. So we prayed and we sought God's guidance. And I remember having the conversations over the kitchen table and him saying, everything's on the table. I'm like, it's not all on the table. He's like, you can't take chemo off. I'm like, it's off the table. And for me, and this is where I feel like you need to listen to your body enough to know, because you know yourself best, right? And I was super sensitive to chemicals and medicine anyway. And I just had this feeling in my gut. And I think it was the Holy Spirit saying, if you do that, it's going to harm you more than it will help you.
Sure.
And so I stood firm in that. And I told Jimmy, I said, I don't want, if I do have a few months to live, I don't want to be weak and in bed and sick. I said, I want to live it out. Let's just live out these last few months that I have. And in that same conversation, I remember him looking at me and he said, you know what, Ivelisse, we could do everything right and you could still die. You could do everything wrong and you could live. Ultimately, your life is in God's hands. And the question we need to be asking is, do we trust him no matter how this turns out?
Wow.
And I think once we answered that
I've
question,
got chills just from hearing that.
Yeah. And I think once we answered that question, say, yeah, Lord, I trust you no matter how this turns out, it relieved the pressure off of him as the caregiver, off of me.
Sure.
And I just said, guide and direct us. Tell me what the next step is. And so I think that is what made the decision for me not to pursue it, knowing it would not have increased my chances of survival.
So you had started off with that kind of feeling, then you found out that you had the liver piece of it as well. And then you did a really, I don't know what the word is, unusual or not known treatment, which most people have never heard of. And you're sitting here cancer-free. So please tell people, first of all, how in the world you found it. And then if you could explain a little bit about what it is and what that process was, please.
Yeah, sure. So two people, this is how God works, from two different walks of life within the same week told me that I had to see this integrative physician. And I was like, the same one. And I'm like, okay, I need to make my appointment. And I made that appointment. And at that appointment, he told us, he looked at everything. He says, wow, you and Jimmy are, the diet's on point, all these additional supplements, what you're doing great. But he says, you're missing one large piece. And I was like, we looked at each other like, what piece? And he said, mistletoe therapy. And Jimmy and I looked at each other and we're like, wait a second, isn't that what you see at
The
Christmas
stuff you get
time?
kissed under, right?
He goes, well, it's
That's
good
what
for that.
everyone would say.
Yeah. And he says, well, it's good for that too.
No
And,
complaints about that.
no complaints. And it was then that he shared me all the clinical studies that have been done in Europe, all over the world about mistletoe therapy. It's been used for 100 years for cancer treatment. And he shared with us all the chemotherapeutic effects, like it causes cancer cell death. It helps with tumor-related pain. For those who are doing conventional treatments, and it help their white blood cell count stay stable. It helps prevent them from being vomiting and nausea and all those awful side effects.
Yes.
So outside of quantity of life, it gives patients quality of life and increases your mood and energy. And, even my oncologist, after he heard what I was doing and I was sharing it with other patients, he said to me, he said, I can tell by patient who is on mistletoe and who's not, because they're not, they're not jaundiced, they're not weak. He goes, I'd have patients having chemo and they'd be out shoveling snow that night. So it really is such a supportive therapy, but it also attacks your cancer cells without attacking your good cells like chemotherapy does.
So you could have it, just to be clear for people watching, you chose to forego the chemotherapy piece, but if someone was doing it, they could also have it as a supplemental either way.
Yes. So it can be used alongside of traditional treatments. And that's how they use it in Europe many times. And for myself, it was the only therapy and surgery that I did. And, and I also want to say this too. I'm always very careful when I share my story that people don't just say, I just need mistletoe and I'm done. Yes. It's one piece of the puzzle. And so I tell people it's almost like a Trivial Pursuit piece. If you've ever played that game, and there's all these little wedges that go into making a whole piece. And so mistletoe is a large piece of that wedge of that Trivial Pursuit piece, but there's emotional side to healing that's not talked about. There's the mental game of, how your mind affects your healing, and then all the different avenues of the physical side of healing. So it's never just one thing. It's looking at the individual, seeing what their body needs, and then helping their immune system to flourish and fight back.
So when you started the treatment, did you feel something right away? Did it take a little while? What was that like for you?
Yeah, so we went in for this appointment. It was 2 weeks prior to my liver surgery. So I had my colon resected. They found the 3 lesions on the liver. And then I had my my integrative physician's appointment, the mistletoe doctor. And then 2 weeks later, I was scheduled for the liver resection. And they were going to remove 20% of my liver. And I started about the injections of mistletoe for 2 weeks prior. And now today there is IV form for those who are in later stages and need just a stronger dose to get their body to stabilize. Then they can do the IV and then continue on with the injections. I didn't have that available for me. I just did the injections of mistletoe.
Sure.
And I think for me, I didn't feel like the effects of it like patients who are on treatment do, because I had just went under surgery, and that took me out for weeks, and just the pain and trying to heal from that. But what I do know is that when I went in for my post-op appointment 10 weeks later, and we're sitting at my oncologist's office, and Jimmy and I were sitting there, and I asked him, I said, so what are the chances that the cancer is back? And he looked at me and he's like, you really want to know? And I was like, yes, I want to know what I'm dealing with. And he said, the chances are that 75% of the time the cancer is back.
Wow.
10 weeks later.
10
And
weeks.
it's because the liver is the filter of your body. So it's the chances are high. So I thank goodness for my husband, who's always positive and just such an encouragement. He's like my lightning rod. And he said, he looked over at me and he says, you know, Ivelisse, I believe you're going to be that 25%. And I said, you know what? I am. And a few minutes later, the scan came through and it said, we all did these big, yay, celebration in the office. And there was no sign of cancer. And I came back 3 months later, no evidence of disease. 3 months after that, no evidence of disease. And then I went 6 months every year, no evidence of disease. So
God is good.
God is good.
So let's talk about what you have done with your experience. You've started this or founded this amazing foundation. And if you would share with everybody, you know, your foundation, what you do, how they can learn more about it, we'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, sure. So in 2011, so after, you know, I was diagnosed in 2008, and Believe Big actually got birthed from at my oncology appointments. Jimmy and I were sitting there and we'd look around the room and, you know, you and I may have an incredible support system or a church that just rallies around you and neighbors. But I was really shocked to see how many people were by themselves waiting for their doctor's appointments. And it was just such a heaviness, even though it was beautifully decorated and there were so many people there that were kind and the workers, there was just spirit of heaviness that was in that room. And I said to Jimmy, I was like, we've got to do something. I feel like God has us here for a reason. And if we're coming, let us try and be a light and an encouragement. And I went back home and I started praying about what that could be. And sure enough, one morning I was drinking my coffee. And I love taking my kids to the paint your own pottery places. And the mug that I always pulled out was the one with their handprints on it. And it made me smile. It made me happy. It made me hopeful to remember who I'm fighting for. And so all of a sudden I'm drinking it and it was almost like God said, that's it. And I was like, we're going to paint mugs for people in the community and we're going to put the word believe on it so that they can believe that they can get well, that they can believe that people in their community do care.
Yes.
And then we put the I will have no fear prayer in it that Jimmy compiled for me. That was the only thing that eliminated the fear and the anxiety from overtaking me many days. And we wrapped them and packaged them and we bring them into the appointments and hand them out to the patients that were there.
Oh, bless your heart.
And I can tell you, Leanne, it was like you would see, I still remember this woman and it's been 13 years. And I remember handing them out. And I saw her opening it up as I handed it to her. And before I left the room, I remember looking back and I see her having the prayer held against her chest. And she was just like crying, like tears were flowing. And it was just a reminder to me that we never know in what ways God can use us to encourage someone who needs it. Whether it's someone in line at the grocery store or someone in a cancer diagnosis, you know. And so that's how Believe Big got birthed. I thought it was just going to be handing out Believe mugs at cancer centers. And then it grew to once I was no evidence of disease for 2 years. When the scan came through, I said to my oncologist, who was one of the lead researchers at Hopkins, I was like, we need to make Mistletoe available to other patients. And he was like, well, it's not that easy. And I said, what needs to be done? And typically for those who are listening with the clinical trial process, typically it's pharmaceutical drugs that are heavily funded by pharmaceutical companies. And they're the ones that have unlimited funds to pay for these things. And so natural therapies like Mistletoe and IV vitamin C and other things that are so powerful on the cancer side, they don't have that backing in order to be able to fund, you know, really good research here in the United States. And so when he told me about this, I said, we're going to raise the funds. We're going to do it. It's got to be done. And then Believe Big became the source of funding for this trial. And the community rallied and we did runs and races and dinners and started the first ever Mistletoe clinical trial at Johns Hopkins in the United States.
Wow. Incredible. Incredible. And what year was that you did your first trial there?
So it actually just completed. So several years of working with German researchers, working with the clinical trial team and onboarding patients. And we just completed it last April. And the review papers are going to have been submitted to the medical journals, and then it becomes peer reviewed. And then once that's published, then we can begin on phase 2 and phase 3. And the reason for it is people are like, why is this trial so important? And for those that don't understand the integrative side of medicine, many times all of that's all out of pocket for patients. So someone wants to go see a mistletoe doctor that can help their internal environment, it's all out of pocket. And so once a trial is completed in the United States, not only does the FDA approve it, so standard oncologists can say, yes, you could do mistletoe therapy, but insurance would also cover it. And that's our biggest goal, to help ease that financial burden that patients are experiencing, and that it can be made available to all, not just those who can afford it.
Yes, I mean, first people have to know about it, then they have to know where to get it, and then they have to have the finances to be able to do so. So you're going to kind of knock all 3 of those down, like when you're bowling, you're going to knock all the pins down at once and, create knowledge, accessibility, affordability. It's remarkable. So your foundation, it started off with mugs, and you've grown to this, in a dream world in, 5-10 years. Where do you want to take this? Do you have any other ways you'd love to expand?
Yeah. So, and for those who are listening, they don't have to wait for the clinical trial to be completed to get mistletoe therapy. I want people to know that we have a list of practitioners on our website by state. They're all over the United States that they can go to and get the help that they need. But also, we don't want this to be a barrier for patients as well. And so we raise funds every day so that patients can, we provide wellness grants or mistletoe and nutrition grants for patients to be able to see these physicians. And so it's been a beautiful process of our community helping each other, not only emotionally and spiritually with the mugs, but also providing financial assistance for those that are having difficulty. And to continue on with mistletoe, it is not expensive by means. So a month's supply of mistletoe is like $200. When you think about it, in the case of one chemo infusion can cost you $5,000. Mistletoe, $200. And so it's doable. And so we help patients to be able to afford that. But, so we're trying to help the patients of today, in the day-to-day. We have advocates that help to connect patients and answer their questions, and everything is free. We don't want any patients to be burdened with more costs. So they reach out to us. All of our resources are free. Our help is free. And I think my biggest goal and vision is something that God put on my heart right before I moved from Maryland to Fort Collins. And it is this vision, his vision of the Believe Big Institute of Health. And what that will be, I'm so excited about it. It will be like a St. Jude's, but of integrative oncology, and for all ages and for all cancers, and a place where a patient and survivors can come and have the best complementary therapies under one roof. So that is our goal. That's what we're working on now. We're raising the funds for the land and building the infrastructure to make this happen.
That's just incredible. And all the families you'll help, because, not only is there the personal tragedy, but as you said, you're a mom of 4, and having lost your dad at a young age, there's such an impact when somebody suffers from cancer and is not blessed to be able to find a way to beat it, like what's happened to you.
Yes. Yes. And we don't want that to happen. I hope that my story and can inspire others to believe that, if God did a miracle in my life, he can do it in theirs. And he is the same yesterday as he is today. And I want to make sure that no one feels hopeless, and that they're always encouraged to know and to believe that there are things out there that can help them that they may not be aware of.
Amen to that. So if someone's watching this and they would like to support your organization, obviously, please give out your website. But what are ways, I know of your nonprofit, so donations certainly never hurt. What are things people can do to support you and the cause that you've taken on?
Yes. Well, the first thing I'd love for everyone to do would be to go onto our website, believebig.org,
Mhm.
and there'll be a pop-up there that will join our family. And I always, sadly, the statistics in the United States are 1 in 2 men and 1 in 3, well, they say 2.4 women will hear they'll have cancer in their lifetime.
Wow.
And they said by the year 2030, the cancer rates are expected to double as high as they already are. And so I don't want anyone to feel unprepared. I want us to be a resource and be people to be ready, similar to like a fire. You have the extinguisher and all those things ready to go.
Yes.
Even if you're not in a cancering process or have someone in a cancering process, be connected with us so that you can be encouraged, because we also send out preventative tips and ways to reduce your risk of getting cancer. And so it's a community to prevent cancer and to help those in their cancer.
Outstanding.
So that's one big important step. Get connected with us in some way on Instagram as well. But I would also say, there are a few things that have been really key. One is something as small as walking into a pottery store, and there's many in Maryland for those that are there. And on our website, they have a listing of pottery stores all over the United States.
Right.
That you can walk in, say, I'd like to paint a Believe mug. You pay $15, you paint it, they fire it, they package it, and it goes to a patient locally where it was painted.
Oh.
So you are going to encourage someone, and I can tell you they just mean so much to know that someone in their community cared. So that's a time investment and a small financial investment. And then for those who really want to help us to really provide grants for patients, if you're willing to sponsor a patient for as little as $25 a month, someone can sponsor a patient so that they get the help that they need, and allow us to continue to fulfill the vision that we have to help patients find their pathway to healing.
Perfect. Well, I'm so thrilled that you would take the time to share all this. And more importantly, what you're doing on such a large scale is so exciting. And there's so many families that lives will be changed because of you. So thank you for all of that, and your faith as a Christian as well, of course.
Thank you for having me. It's been so great to be with you today.
So if any of you are watching this on the Facebook group, Ivelisse has joined the Facebook group, so you can tag her and leave a comment or a question if you have any. And if you're watching this on the YouTube channel, please feel free to go ahead and do that and share too. This is really important. Obviously, the statistics on cancer are staggering. So you can share this with as many people as you can. They can get that free information, preventative information, and we can help her dreams come true and help a lot of people stay healthy. So again, thank you so much. And for all of you, this is part 1 of a series we're going to be doing on health. So we'll be back with something different next week, but I don't know if I've ever heard an overcome story like this, Ivelisse. So I will just tell you, in all my years, and for those of you watching who don't know, my father was a radiation oncologist. So I grew up around this, and never did I hear anything in my entire life like what you have overcome. And it is a sign of, faith and God and so many other wonderful things. So bless you for doing that. And I really want to get as much support and as much exposure for your organization as possible.
Thank you so much.
So we'll see you all live next week. Thank you so much. Share, share, share. Let everyone hear her story and hear about Believe Big. Take care, everyone. See you next Tuesday.